Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be reading through Feather Sharp as Knives, Chapter 6, and see what we can learn from this view. I'm super excited. Last time we saw that the main characters, Imelda, Arturo, and Venezia, came to a deal where Venezia will give them $5 million, double dollars, woolongs. And I can't actually remember the currency. We'll check it out as we go about it. But basically, 5 million Boku bucks to finish these wings that Imelda and Arturo are using. And Imelda and Arturo are hoping that with that money, they'll be able to move away from having to get married off. And so that's essentially the price that they're going for and what they're trying to do. So we now have a solution to the conflict, and it's about just seeing it come through. And we have to see what is it Venezia is looking for and what is she trying to do with that. So let's get into it. This is from Venezia's perspective, so it's going to be exciting to see more from that. All right. Now, as we move into it, it was hard for Venezia to concentrate as the Secretary of Finance droned on. It had been 3 hours since Venezia had promised Arturo and Imelda 5 million ducats, that's the currency, for the wings. 3 hours since she'd sealed her promises with 6 kisses. If Primo found out she was helping them, even indirectly at this point, to rebel against him, he'd be furious. But it wasn't the only way he wasn't. But it wasn't the only way she wasn't rebelling against him. She brought her attention back to the council meeting. This is a little ominous. I'm interested to see what this is pointing towards. She brought her attention back to the council meeting. The Labyrinth lottery was in 2 hours, and the council still hadn't voted on the number of captains they'd allowed to buy their way in. 2 hours, and they'd been debating all morning. This lot of old men had forgotten the value of time, forgotten anything beyond the value of their own pockets. Her foot tapped as the secretary enumerated the many advantages, most of them financial, the city would glean from accepting more purchase entries. Wow, you would think Venezia didn't like money. You can tell she's probably grown up with it. Those were the measurable assets, but the unmeasurable benefits outweighed them. Allowing a non commissioned officer born into a lower class the chance to become a lion and a noble would provide greater results. That soldier would be grateful to the military in a way no high-born son would. They'd be more determined to prove themselves as well. The choice was clear, just as her choice regarding the wings had been clear. Clear even because most of the assets the wings promised were measurable. Most, but not all. They provide any that owned them with a strategic advantage over any other country in the unknown world. That alone was worth 5 ducats. She literally believes that these things are going to work. I wonder if we're going to get a little Icarus action. Finally, Enrico Lando, council president, stood. We will now convene to the voting chamber, he said. The slim man was Primo's biggest ally, and frankly his biggest sycophant. He even went against Fanson and sported a mustache and no beard, same as Primo. One at a time, starting with Primo. I didn't know Primo was rocking just the stash. That's kind of cool, actually. They left the room. I think it's cool that you brought that up. So this is a cool way to just talk about that. So think about how effective this sentence is before we go on. The slim man was Primo's biggest ally and frankly his biggest sycophant. So we're seeing her judge him right here in this saying, but he also went against fashion and sported a mustache, no beard, same as Primo. So we see that this guy's a suck up. So you've done tons of characterization as well as you've done appearance. This is where you're killing two birds with one stone. So whenever you're writing, you're always shooting for things like this. This is a good example of how you can set a character up and create a dynamic between them as well within the relationships, right? And so you're as well as you're seeing how what she notices, right? So you can tell she's really interested in how people sit to Primo. This is talk about getting mileage out of just a few sentences. This is a good example of like fantastic writing and prose to really tell phenomenal story. This is talk about mileage right here. Venezia exited third after Enrico. She walked into the road room donning a black hooded cloak, black gloves, and black mask. The mask was not tied on but had a bit on the inside. It was held by one's teeth, thus ensuring silence and anonymity during the vote. That's really cool. She took 2 stones, one white and one black, from the bowl. And Thummim? Then, with a glance in the mirror to ensure she was completely covered, she entered the voting chamber. I guess it's just voting, right? The room was plain and dark with no windows. The only source of light was a roaring fire in a large hearth. They lit it no matter the season. Voting in the summer was a miserable affair. Even now, at the end of winter, it heated the room to an almost uncomfortable temperature. I can attest, fireplaces are real. They really heat it up. Enrico was easy to spot as the only other person in voting robes. He stood with his back to the room. Primo as Doce didn't vote anonymously, and he only voted if there was a tie. He wore a black robe without a hood and a white bauta mask. I don't know what that is, but it sounds cool. Tied on so he could speak freely. Primo's secretary stood next to him, holding the voting bowl, which was covered by a cloth. Venezia faced the wall and waited. Voting was so tedious this way. Why all the ceremony? They could find a different method to ensure anonymity. To fogo with tradition, it wasted time and talent. Though when Primo announced that everyone was here and they could turn around, she couldn't help but admire the effect of the black robes and masks. In the dim light, they looked like visions of death. It did invoke a sense of somberness, and that was it, the only benefit to the antiquated practice. Primo regarded each person in turn. The proposed number of purchase entries into the labyrinth is 19, which will allow one lieutenant to be drawn in the lottery. Cast your votes as Beniamino presents the bowl to you. White is in favor, black is in disagreement. If the opposing side wins, we will reconvene to the council chamber to discuss a different number of captains allowed to buy access. Okay. So it sounds like people are able to get into their nobility with this way. See, this is like where sometimes, obviously, she's explaining it and kind of giving us an understanding of that. And sometimes just having something explained is simply just that simple. Sometimes we don't need to overthink it. So this is a good example. Beniamino walked around the circle, and one by one the council members put their stones in. Their gloves hid the color of their stone. Beniamino kept the cloth over the bowl, only allowing enough space for Venezia to drop her black stone in. Okay, so now I know what it is. I realize I understand the system. I don't understand what Venezia voted for, though. Venezia to drop her black stone in. So I don't know if that's for or against the movement and telling us about Primo. So this is set up well, but maybe, knowing what it is. I'm sure it'll be addressed later, but when she does an action and not knowing it, I feel like I should know it at this point. For Venezia to drop her black stone in, when he had collected all the votes, he took the bowl to Primo, who looked through the bowl to count the votes. 7 for, 5 against. Since there is no tie, my vote is not needed. The council's decision was clear. We will draw one lieutenant's name in the lottery this afternoon. They left in the same order as they entered. Venezia shoved. So what did she vote for, and what was the counter argument again? So what did she vote for? What were the counter arguments? I feel like those things need to be fairly clear, just because it's for context, and maybe I'm just dumb, but I'm not understanding this clear. They left in the same order as they entered. Venezia shoved her robe into a peg and dropped her mask on the shelf and her white stone into the bowl. In the hall outside, she waited with arms crossed, staring out the windows of the ground porch. Fia Pesaro exited the council chamber and walked over. The buxom woman, smooth olive skin, powdered almost faintly, wore at least 5 strands of pearls and a dress with a meter-long train. Close call, Fleet Admiral, she said. We had a few other allies, at least. We have to find a way to bring others to our side. Venezia drummed her fingers on her arm. You're a shrewd businesswoman, Ciora. Why did you vote against funds for the city? As you told me, true loyalty is a powerful thing that cannot be bought. Fia would know as the woman who owned the last remaining slave company in the Republic. Ooh, bad B. How to get the others to understand. She pursed her lips as 2 councilmen exited the council chamber. Leave that to me. Signor Ruzzini, one of the men, walked up with a smug look on his face. Poor lost Signore. He had the gall to pat Venezia's arm. She jerked it away. See? So soft, always thinking with your hearts. He shook his head. True councilmen would should put their logic first. Primo approached, followed by Enrico Lando. Fia turned on a bright smile for Signora Rizzuni. Maybe you could help me with it. Over a full dinner at my house tonight? She allowed herself to be led away by Rizzini, flashing a wink at Venezia. She was willing to play the part, which was part of the reason she was the ally Venezia needed. She would play it and twist it to her and Venezia's motives. Ooh, these are dark, twisted women, and men are stupid and fall for it every time. Primo spared a glance for Rosini and Fia before turning to Venezia. I need you to come with me to my parlor. We have a visitor. Venezia arched an eyebrow. Why, they don't want to meet with the council or even the cabinet? It's a sensitive matter, apparently. This is Siore speaking, yes? I want to make sure. This would be interesting. Which way would you have voted had there been a tie? Venezia asked. Oh, no, this is Primo, spared a glance. Duh, it says right here, Primo. Maybe a Primo said, but it's really, maybe I'm just dumb. Venezia asked as they made their way through the hall, Enrico following them. Primo nodded at people as they passed. I see the merits of both sides. You have to choose. Primo lowered his voice. 19 is an extravagance. 14 or 15 purchase entries would be wiser, but you know how the treasury thinks. They also want to risk allowing too many lowborns into the nobility. See, even money can't make you highborn. It's about the blood, right? Primo, in agreement as they reached the Dozo's parlor. I like how she said that. The Primo, in agreement. That's a good, I'm going to use that. His secretary hurried to open the doors, wisely saying nothing to Venezia, and scurried off to retrieve the visitor. Other than the mural of Giotoro and Ioana, the room was like the rest of the palazzo. Dark wood paneling with silver inlay, pretentious in a restrained way. The mural was beautiful, painted by the finest artists in Frenza. The council room and Dolce's audience chamber need more of this decoration. Rialto is a world power, and their central building should reflect that. Palazzo Dogal should be covered in visions of their many successes. The walls and ceilings ought to be dripping in silver. When she was Doze, that would be her first act. You can tell this lady has her priorities straight. It's not, free the slaves. It's not, make sure that the voting is clean so that, the right people can get in. It's not changing power structures. It's making sure that the place she lives and represents the people is ballin' and lined with silver. This is a lady who has her priorities straight. Anyway, Enrico perched in a chair in front of Primo's desk as if he didn't want to wrinkle his coat. Venezia sat on the couch. Primo frowned at her casual composure, but said nothing as he selected a wine from the many bottles along the sideboard. She could push him a bit, but not too much. He couldn't suspect her plans to take the crown and sash from him. Primo poured a small glass for himself. Would either of you like some? Enrico visibly wrestled with his answer. Drink on the job or please Jose Albizi? Yes, your serenity. Oh, I like how she presented those options. That's cool. Venezia waved the offer away. Who's the visitor? Primo handed a glass to Enrico. Giannis Komnenos, grandson of the late Emperor Gregorios Komnenos. Venezia sat upright. What? Primo's eyebrows pinched together. Don't tell me you still hold a grudge for Gregorio's massacre. Whenever you use the word massacre, I feel like that's a bit of a trigger word, not gonna lie. I just don't understand why he's here. Isn't it obvious? He wants the throne back. Enrico frowned. That the Liliani would let him keep it. So is that the Liliani? Because that's the first time I've heard that. Is that an actual term, or is it like a swear word? There's always some hungry noble waiting to depose a weak ruler over there. But why now? Venezia asked, right before Carnevale, when everyone would forget about politics for a week. He disappeared from their minds as quickly as the citizens' morals. That's funny. He'd never convince anyone to join his side, and the council would vote once they reconvened after the holiday. Such terrible timing. Primo sipped his wine. Most likely he found some support. Who'd be fool enough to align himself with a family that condoned murder? Enrico muttered into his glass. The Lando family had lost members in the Rialtani massacre in Yalos 20 years before. Okay, so it was a people, wasn't it? It wasn't a derogatory term. Emperor Gregarious let the whims of his people affect the decisions, Primo said. That's not the mark of a good leader. Fedezio stood in stranger dress. This Janus might prove to have a different character. Primo finished his wine and set the glass on his sideboard. He held out his hand for Enrico's goblet and placed it next to his. He might, he said doubtfully. Now, this is only part one. And so far, I find it really cool to see the sort of inner workings of the political sphere. You also realize that even though Venezia is political, she's less about the politics. You can see that she's like there's almost like a deeper underlying reason. I kind of am interested in exploring that more, seeing what is it outside of the political differences she's trying to make. Because a lot of the things she says are fairly vain and judgmental, which tells you that there's a level of like significance of power she's shooting for here. But what's the greater meaning? And that's something that I'm interested in trying to figure out. So yeah, that's actually, I'm super intrigued by that, and I'm super excited to see how this will turn out. And so, guys, thanks so much for checking out Feather Sharpened Knives, Chapter 6. I'm super excited about this book. It's progressing well. There's some action and some nice things. So if you like some political intrigue and like sort of like a Venusian, like Venus, Venetian sort of fantasy setting, this is definitely a good one to check out. Like and subscribe and stay up to date on all the updates we're making in the channel. The Girl and the Beast, my third volume of my series, is going to be coming out soon. So look forward for more on that. And I'll be having some videos come out with that as well. So really looking forward to it. Guys, thanks so much for all you do. Stay happy, stay healthy, and hey, check out these good advice, especially that little bit on getting mileage out of your writing, because little things where you can talk about why a character does something and how it fits within the setting. Like a good example, I just want to make sure I hit this tip before you guys leave. This was a really good one that I thought was just amazing. The slim man was Tigo's biggest ally. He went against fashion, sport, and mustache, and no beard, same as Primo. When you can explain the reason for an appearance, a character's motivation, as well as a judgment in 2 sentences, you're getting a lot of mileage out of it, right? And so, really, that you guys might take this for granted, but this does so much to set up the character, his relationship to Primo, his relationship to Venezia. So, in throughout the whole scene, just through this way, we get the appearance, we get the emotional resonance. We get so much out of this. So whenever you're shooting for character descriptions or you're introducing some new element, the more layers you can get in with prose like this, that's really what you want to be shooting for. So that, I think, is the big golden nugget today, and that's what we'll be talking about, is like how to get mileage out of a few sentences. And that is a fantastic lesson. So guys, take care, stay happy, stay healthy, and keep writing. Peace.